In 1590, an English relief party finally arrived on the North American coast. They found wisps of smoke and an intact settlement, but completely empty grounds. This historical illustration highlights the only physical evidence left by the vanished settlers: two carvings, the letters CRO etched into a tree, and the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post. Generations of folklore treat this disappearance as a supernatural mystery, but the records point toward a predictable collapse of logistical support. To understand how an entire community vanished, we have to look past the mythology and examine the mathematical realities of early colonization. In the 1500s, European powers raced to map and claim these vast territories across the Americas. A permanent settlement was the ultimate prize. The target for the English crown was this stretch of the Carolina coastline. Executing that plan, however, was exceptionally dangerous. Survival relied entirely on a fragile logistical lifeline. Every piece of hardware, clothing, and supplemental food had to survive a punishing, multi-month journey across the Atlantic Ocean. The English were attempting a logistical tightrope walk with zero margin for error. Any single mistake would immediately compound into total disaster. The first fatal error happened 2 years before the famous lost colonists even arrived. In 1585, England sent a heavily militarized expedition to Roanoke Island. The brutal ocean crossing depleted their stores, leaving the soldiers with virtually no supplies when they made landfall. This engraving depicts the sophisticated society the desperate military men encountered. Following a minor diplomatic dispute, the English retaliated by burning this highly organized, agriculturally rich Aquascagok village to the ground. Biological devastation immediately followed the violence. European smallpox and influenza epidemics ripped through every native population that encountered the soldiers. With communication entirely broken down and violence escalating, the surviving military personnel finally gave up and abandoned the colony. The 1585 expedition poisoned the diplomatic well. Their aggression left the Carolina coast a hostile war zone for anyone who dared to follow. When the second colonial attempt arrived in 1587, the demographic contrast was stark. These were middle-class Londoners with zero military experience. Looking at this vintage map of the Barrier Islands, you can see where this new group attempted to establish their settlement on Croatoan Island, just 40 miles south of the original failed site. These inexperienced civilians unknowingly stepped directly into the violently hostile environment created by their military predecessors. Their survival depended entirely on a resupply ship from home. But in 1588, a desperate relief mission sent to the colony was intercepted and looted by Spanish naval vessels operating off the coast. The immediate fallout of that Spanish interception was absolute. English authorities completely lost track of the colony's new location. By 1588, the civilians were trapped in a perfect storm of systems failure. They were surrounded by hostile locals, stripped of military defense, and permanently cut off from European supplies. When a relief mission finally reached the site in 1590, they found an abandoned fort and tree carvings. They found zero trace of the inhabitants. Faced with an expensive failure, the English bureaucracy simply wrote them off. The Crown formally deemed the stranded citizens the lost colony and moved on. Roanoke was erased by a brutal equation: Spanish geopolitical interference, added to terrible military diplomacy, multiplied by inexperienced logistical planning. It would take decades of continued, painful trial and error before the English learned to master these complex logistical systems and successfully establish Jamestown. The lost colony of Roanoke remains a chilling, tragic historical monument to the unforgiving mathematical price of early American colonization.